With rivalry weekend behind us and the chaos of college football in full swing, it is time for fans to shift their focus to the postseason. But first, we must wait and see what teams get the first round byes with a conference championship victory this weekend. Welcome back to Penn State Sports Night. I'm Lauren Harth, joined by Ethan Ellis and Nate Johns, and we're here to break down this weekend's conference championships. Let's start down south with the SEC. We are getting a matchup between Texas and Georgia, but all season it's been back and forth. It seemed like a new team had the lead of the SEC every week. But this is a rematch. Georgia came out on top 30-15 the first time around. Ethan, can they do it again?
Right, so I think Georgia has a legitimate chance to do this again, and a lot of people don't think so, but you have to remember when they won 30-15, they went into Austin and upset the Longhorns. So there's a few things to take away from this game. One, Carson Beck had 3 interceptions in the game. If Georgia can limit those turnovers, that 30-15, that could be a lot wider of a margin come this Saturday. Also, this game is going to be kind of a home game for the Bulldogs. I mean, Atlanta is only, 40 minutes to an hour away from Georgia. So this really is going to be a home field advantage for the Bulldogs. Now, the one thing Georgia does have working against them is that their running back, Trevor Etienne, is not going to be playing in this game. They have Nate Frazier. Now, Frazier's done a decent job in taking over that role for Etienne, but it's still some big shoes to fill. But I think Georgia is going to be the team to beat this weekend. I think we're going to see that championship caliber team show up this weekend. We've seen them be a little bit up and down, but I think if Georgia can get some scores off early, they'll be just fine.
Absolutely, and that's going to be the key for them is just maintaining possession. Like you talked about, they won that game in Austin 30-15, but honestly, their record at Mercedes-Benz Stadium isn't very good. They're only 5-5. 4 of those losses came in an SEC championship game. The 5th one, of course, was that national championship game against Alabama. But this Georgia team, the last 2 weeks, I don't think they've been all that impressive. They gave up 21 points to a UMass team that fired their head coach, whatever, it's UMass. And then they had an 8 overtime game against Georgia Tech. And I know it was rivalry weekend and crazy things happened, but you cannot be confident if you're Georgia going into that game, knowing how close they were to needing that game to get into the playoffs. Both these teams will be in the playoffs. The first round bye is going to be huge for both of them. It'll be interesting to see how healthy Quinn Ewers is, considering he's been playing banged up, it feels like, all year long. But ultimately, I think Texas will be able to pull this one out. They've been playing great football lately. They decimated Florida, which looks a lot better than it did, say, a month ago. And the Longhorns, first year in the SEC, it's been a great year for Texas teams in new conferences, which we'll get to that more in the ACC championship game. But we're going hook 'em this weekend.
I agree with you both that it kind of is a toss-up, but the biggest thing in my mind is, does Georgia show up? They can either be really on or really off. And the key thing is they were behind Georgia Tech 20-6 going into the fourth quarter. Against a team like Texas, that cannot happen. They need to be in the game right from the start. So it's really going to come down to, can they show up? Can they make those plays and keep themselves in the game? But looking at Texas, since their loss to Georgia, they have been very consistent and been able to regroup. They have won each of their games except for the one the week after at Vanderbilt. And, there must be something in Vanderbilt Stadium that's given some teams a hard time. But they have won all of their other games since that matchup against Vanderbilt by at least 2 possessions. So they just need to continue that momentum going into this weekend. And I think Texas will come out on top. But now let's switch over where it's kind of been a shoo-in for, ironically, Miami to be in the ACC championship. But now they're out with their second loss of the season to Syracuse, and now 2 unranked team losses, But now we're going to see SMU against Clemson. What do you expect to see from these 2 teams, Nate?
Well, I'm just surprised to see that these 2 teams are here because Miami, they had the hands up. I call it the smiley face because on the hat, it looks like a smiley face. And then, they had to go to the Carrier Dome or JMA Wireless Dome, whatever they're calling it now. And they lost 21-0, and they lost. That's all you need to say about Miami. But as for the 2 teams that are here, SMU is probably the biggest surprise in college football in terms of their involvement in Conference Championship Weekend. The Mustangs, of course, came into the season. They won the American last year. They spent all that money to come into the ACC, and it's already paid dividends. They've been great all year. Their offense, 40 points per game. They're allowing less than 20 points per game. And their only loss came against BYU, which ended up being a way better loss than anybody possibly thought it could be. And as for Clemson, they have some issues that they need to work out on the offensive side of the ball. They only put up 14 points against South Carolina. And the key for this is going to be, can they get Phil Maffa going and get going with the running game? Cade Klubnik's had some pretty good games, but he's going to need some support. I don't know if they're going to be able to give it to him just with how great SMU's been, so I'm going with the Mustangs.
Right, and building off of that, I mean, they've beaten 2 out of the 3 teams that were ranked or are now ranked. They beat Pitt, and they also beat Louisville and they beat Pitt by a considerable margin. So I think this SMU offense is really going to be the difference maker in this game. And I think Kevin Jennings has been having an incredible year, and he's been playing incredible against these top 25 teams. So if Clemson can't figure out how to shut down him, then it's really not going to be that competitive of a game. We've seen Clemson struggle a lot this year, and I think they're going to struggle against Kevin Jennings and this SMU offense.
That quarterback change saved their season.
I think the biggest thing for Clemson is their 2 ranked opponents, Georgia and South Carolina, they've lost to. And now they're going to face off against SMU, a ranked opponent. And I just think Clemson doesn't have it in them to beat SMU. SMU's been hot this season. As you mentioned, Ethan, they've won by considerable margins. They have defeated their other opponents. So really, it's their game to win, in my opinion.
And don't forget, Clemson lost to Louisville at home.
Yes. Lastly, let's travel out west to focus on the Big Ten now. They finished in a 4-way tie for the regular season, which is a little crazy. But the teams that came out and won the tiebreaker is Arizona State and Iowa State. Ethan, what do you expect to see from these teams, and who do you think can win this one?
Yeah, by far, this was the most fun conference to watch these past 2 or 3 weekends. I mean, we did not know who was going to be in the championship game until it literally came down to the last few minutes. So one thing I'm looking at is Arizona State. I mean, they were somewhat the surprise team to make this championship game. They had a big end of the season run, and that's what's got them here. And that's why I kind of like them in this game. They have that momentum late in the season. That's one of the biggest factors that you can factor into a game like this is momentum. I think they have incredible running back in Cam Scavado, and I think that he's going to be the difference maker against these Cyclones. I mean, we saw the Cyclones almost trip up against Kansas State, and now they have to go in and face Arizona State. So I really think that Arizona State's on a roll. They have the momentum, and I just don't think Iowa State has the team that you need to beat Arizona State.
Yeah, but that's exactly the situation that Iowa State has thrived in. I mean, we've seen the Big 12 be the Wild West this year, and the Cyclones came out of it. They were kind of the preseason underdog, kind of like SMU was in the ACC. They sort of filled that role in the Big 12. But I want to talk about Rocco Becht. Rocco Becht started last year after there were some issues with the whole gambling suspension thing that was going on around the program. This year he's thrown for 3,000 yards, 20 touchdowns, and he's led the Cyclones team to their first ever 10-win season. Huge shout out to Coach Matt Campbell. He brought the team to the championship game a few years ago when they had Brock Purdy, ironically enough. Wonder what he's up to these days. But both of these coaches really have a case for Coach of the Year. Kenny Dillingham, he took a team that was projected last in the Big 12 preseason poll. He's got to be up there for Coach of the Year alongside Ryan Day. Matt Campbell, talked about him already. So this is really going to come down to the playmakers. Cam Scatabo, the Heisman candidate at running back, probably not the favorite at running back even, which is weird to say in college football. But still, he's been a difference maker for them. I could see this one going either way. And with the mess that the Big 12 has been, it's been crazy. I'm going to go Iowa State just because we don't know what to expect.
I completely agree with you. You don't know what to expect. I think this is the matchup that in everybody's mind is the most up in the air and who's going to come out on top. Both teams have finished the season strong, but I ultimately think it's going to be Arizona State coming out on top. Yes, they're both coming off of some great wins to end the season, but in my opinion, Arizona State has had the quality wins that set them up well to beat Iowa State this weekend. We will have to wait until Saturday to see if our predictions come true. Head over to our YouTube channel to watch some of our fellow Penn State Sports Night members break down the Big Ten championship matchup between the Penn State Nittany Lions and the Oregon Ducks. For Ethan Ellis and Nate Johns, I'm Lauren Harth. Thanks for watching and have a great night.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to this edition of Penn State Sports Night. For more content like this and so much more, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and X. For everyone here at Penn State Sports Night,
We are
Penn State Sports Night.